welcome to Whispers of Ink. I'm Machado de Assis, and now I will read one of my stories.
Let's start with the book Wilderness, which is part of my novels collection. Chapter 1. Jose S. P. Vargas was the worst kind of lawyer someone who only worked for others. After 20 years of constant effort, through sun and rain, endless exhaustion and humiliation, he found himself exactly where he had started. The only difference, he had begun at 20, alone, and now he had a wife and 2 children. The story of one of these fighters from the courthouse still needs to be told. If someone ever writes it, it might not be as colorful or exciting as other stories, but it could be even sadder because of its monotony, or maybe just because of that. But let's not talk about the lawyer or his struggles right now. Let's talk about his son, Silvestre, a pale boy of 15, quiet and gloomy, always lost in his own thoughts. He was like a flower born in a place with little sunlight, already beginning to bend its petals back to the earth from where it came. Silvestre had caused his mother endless pain during her pregnancy. Maybe that's why he was more loved than his sister, a girl of 12, full of life and joy, always smiling, healthy, and full of energy. The father made up for it by loving her more than he loved Silvestre. In the end, both parents loved both children, with just a small difference in feeling nothing more. Jose Vargas made sure his son learned how to read and write. That was all he could offer. Silvestre taught himself a little French on his own. At 14, his father wanted him to become his assistant in the law office, but the boy's weak body didn't promise much for such hard work. So it seemed better to send him to a notary office where he could train to become an official clerk, and maybe later a judge or a public notary. That way, the Vargas family would stay within the world of law for another generation. Silvestre never said a word against these plans. Did he even hear what people said about him? He would sit alone, staring at the sky, his head in his hands, as if trapped by one single thought. His eyes, big and bright, held all the life that had left the rest of his body. Silvestre had straight, unkempt hair that fell loosely over his temples, giving him a vague resemblance to Napoleon, though more the Napoleon of ideas than of action, and far less rugged. At home, people believed he was sick, physically ill, maybe something with his heart, or his spleen, or even worms. But not in his soul. No, the boy had no heartbreaks. In the family's view, the soul only got sick from sadness. Most of his nights were spent reading an old book he had bought from a street peddler, the day his mother gave him a few coins. Nobody in the house knew what the book was, since it was written in French. But when his sister told their mother that the book was full of pictures, everything made sense. Of course, the illustrations must have charmed him. Unfortunately, one day Silvestre forgot the book and left it on the dinner table. His father saw it, opened it, and took it away. A little brat flipping through pictures of naked women. Silvestre cried bitterly in the privacy of his room. His mother, who had stopped the punishment the lawyer father had already planned, came to comfort him. She tried to explain how wrong those images were, and warned him not to let himself be corrupted by indecent drawings. He listened, but kept crying, until his sadness wore him out, his tears dried up, and hope returned to his face. The first money he could save, he used to find another copy of that book. He wandered around peddlers, searched through shelves and drawers for a week or more, until he finally found the very copy he had been longing for. If he had discovered a diamond, he couldn't have been happier. He tucked the book between his shirt and his skin and hurried home, where he hid it carefully, locking it away and promising himself never to leave it lying on any table again. When the decision was made that Sylvester would start working at a notary's office, the news was passed on to him. He listened, nodded, and obeyed, but not without a quiet ache inside. Sylvester walked into the office with a heavy heart, but his father had been clear. From now on, he needed to earn his own living. If he worked hard and stayed focused, his father promised, he would soon see the rewards of his effort. Sylvester tried to believe him. He wanted to. So he rolled up his sleeves and started his new life at the clerk's office. They gave him papers to copy, documents to stitch together, and other small tasks. At first, he tried his best. He really did. But the work felt dull, and it didn't speak to him. Still, he used every ounce of attention he had. The problem was, his mind often wandered. He'd look out the window or get lost in his own thoughts. Then mistakes happened, whole pages copied wrong, or not copied at all. He'd start over, again and again, wasting paper and the clerk's patience. One of the clerks, a man known as the office's faithful assistant, started to dislike Sylvester. Maybe it was his lack of focus, or maybe it was something else. Either way, Sylvester drew a funny picture of the man, a bit exaggerated, a bit mean. Word got around. It wasn't a big thing, but it hurt Sylvester's chances of moving up in the office. Days passed slowly. Each one felt longer than the last. And with every passing hour, Sylvester lost more hope that the future his father had promised would ever come true. Then one afternoon, everything changed. Sylvester was walking past the Academy of Fine Arts when he noticed the doors were open. Without thinking, he stepped inside. He asked if he could see some paintings. His request was simple, and no one saw a reason to say numero, but something about the boy caught their attention. He was clearly moved. His eyes shone with something deeper than curiosity. It was the look of someone who had just seen something holy. He stayed for 2 hours. When he finally left, his eyes were wide, his hands shook slightly, and his heart beat faster than before. The sight of the rooms, the students, the art, it had stirred something inside him. He saw the paintings hanging on the walls with his eyes, but in his mind, he saw hundreds of masterpieces. And above them all, one stood out. A painting he hadn't seen before, but one he somehow knew was his. It lived inside him, waiting to be born. This was not the silly drawing he made of the clerk, nor the boring copies he wrote every day. No, this was something real. He walked the streets for a long time after that. He didn't know where he was going, only that he needed to think. He asked himself how he could trade his pen for a brush. The answer came quickly. He had to ask his father. And so, full of a joy he hadn't felt in a long time, he hurried home. His family had never seen him so happy. As soon as he got inside, he ran to his room and opened a special book. It was a book about painting, filled with pictures of famous artworks. He stared at the pages, not just with his eyes, but with his whole soul. This was where he belonged. This was his path. Silvestre walked through the halls of the National Museum of Fine Arts like a man in a dream. The naked women in the paintings, the ones that had so upset the prosecutor, were no ordinary figures. They were Venuses and Bacchantes, bold and alive, standing among the virgins painted by Correggio and Raphael. Silvestre stared at the works for a long time. He read and reread the lives of the great painters, not out of ambition, not wondering if he would ever reach the fame of Domenichino or Rembrandt. That wasn't it at all. What stirred inside him was a vision, a scene he had to paint, a feeling, something deep and powerful that begged to be captured on canvas and offered to eternity. That same day, he went to his mother and asked her to take him out of the law office and send him to the academy instead. She smiled sadly. She didn't understand what drove him, but she felt the weight of her duty as a mother. She passed the message to her husband. The prosecutor had never thought much of painting. To him, it was only good for portraits, and even that was becoming pointless now that daguerreotype had taken over. The whole world, it seemed, had already chosen photographs over paintings. When his wife told him about the boy's wish, he simply shrugged. But when Silvestre came in person and asked again, José Vargas lost his temper. "Are you out of your mind?" he said, flaring his nostrils. "You think you'll make a living by smearing cloth?" Silvestre tried to explain. He wasn't after money or fame. He wanted to create something, to bring a vision to life. But his father's mind could not grasp the idea of art as transformation. He cut his son off mid-sentence and sent him back to the law office. There was no other choice but to obey. Silvestre obeyed. At first he felt crushed. But after a few days, he began to lift himself out of that sadness. He found ways to slip out of the office at certain times, on certain days, and return to the Museum of Fine Arts. There, he met one of the students who studied there. They became close. They shared secrets. Silvestre told the student some of his own dreams, and when their friendship grew strong, something that happens quickly among young people, he was invited to the student's home. There, in secret, he received his first drawing lessons. Silvestre showed him some sketches he had done in secret. The student was amazed at how natural his talent seemed, and couldn't believe Silvestre had never had a teacher. "I've never had one," Silvestre replied simply. "I copied some engravings from a book I own." He managed to get a few lessons, but the teacher, noticing one day that his student had surpassed him, felt embarrassed and stopped giving him help. Silvestre immediately faced his first difficulties. He didn't lose hope, though that wasn't his nature. What he had already learned was enough to let his talent grow. He threw himself into art with all his heart. Young and inexperienced like Raphael, he still believed he was destined for greatness. For him, greatness wasn't about applause or fame, but simply about creating something meaningful. When he thought his drawing skills were getting better, he tried working with colors. He found a canvas, set up an easel, and started experimenting on his own. After many attempts, he realized he still had a lot to learn. He returned to the academy, pretending to visit his old teacher, but really, he wanted to watch how others worked. A professor from the school noticed how carefully Silvestre followed the lessons. He saw something special in the boy's eyes, a quiet hunger for knowledge and a spark of talent. The professor became his friend and offered him private, hands-on lessons in his studio. Silvestre absorbed everything quickly, almost as if he had been born to paint. The professor's kindness and dedication touched Sylvestre deeply. Along with the technical skills he loved so much, those lessons also gave him a strong belief in human generosity. The student became devoted to the teacher, and the teacher, in turn, became like a father to the student. Sylvestre's dream, or maybe it was more than a dream. It was a need, was to bring to life a Venus he had imagined in his mind. He wanted to show her to the world, to let people see what he saw. Sylvestre sat in the corner of the small office, sunlight slipping through the dusty window behind him. His pen hovered over the paper, but his mind was far away. He had just read something in a book that wouldn't leave his head, something about the Christian faith casting out the old gods of ancient times. He didn't fully understand what pagan gods were, but bits and pieces from the pages had turned gave him a rough idea. And from that, an image formed in his mind. Venus cast from the heavens, her face not serene like the statues had seen, but full of sorrow, her posture showing loss and pride at once. His art teacher, a man who believed in modern ideas and new themes, had tried to steer him away from such old myths. "There's beauty in the land we live in," had said. "In our people, our legends, our stories. That's where you should find your inspiration." But Sylvestre couldn't let go of Venus. The book had taken hold of him, and the first time he read it, he felt like something inside him had shifted. "You want to paint beauty," the teacher had said one day, watching him sketch. "That's fine. You've chosen Venus, goddess of grace. Go ahead. Paint her. Then come back to what I've shown you." But painting and paperwork didn't mix. Sylvestre worked as a clerk, copying legal documents for the town's notary. It was a quiet job, meant for careful minds. His, however, was not so quiet. With every brush of color in his mind, the ink on the page seemed duller. Mistakes crept into his work. He forgot lines, mixed up names, and more than once, simply didn't show up at all. The notary at first tried to ignore it. But when a key document was delayed because of Sylvestre's carelessness, the man had no choice but to speak to the boy's father. The father, already worried about his son's absences, listened in silence. When he heard how distracted Sylvestre had become, how he no longer cared for his duties, he felt as though someone had stolen all his dreams. "That rascal," he shouted. "It'll teach him a lesson he won't forget. This nonsense with paintings, it's all he thinks about." It was only thanks to his mother's pleading that the punishment was softened. But the message was clear. The world expected him to choose paint or paper. And Sylvestre, heart full of color and sky, already knew what he wanted. Sylvestre must become a lawyer, whether he likes it or not, José Vargas declared. The courts will put food on his table, not painted cloth. Either he works the way I say, or he'll send him straight to the arsenal. He paused, his voice shaking with anger. A scoundrel. To betray a decent man's trust, ruin his papers, almost get him in trouble. Can anyone tolerate that? Get out. Leave this house. That last shout came from the father's heart. Deep down, he felt the soft, sorrowful look from his son beginning to weaken his anger. Sylvestre went to his room heartbroken. At 15, he saw clearly that he had to choose between two paths, art or family. Love and calling fought within him with equal strength. It was a bitter, stubborn battle, which ended not with victory, but with hope, the hope that he could somehow balance the law office and the artist's workshop. That illusion comforted him, as all illusions do. Later, his father called him back. "I've made up my mind," said Jose Vargas, enjoying the false joy in his son's eyes. "I'm taking you out of my office. You'll work as a clerk for Dr. Luis Borges. Not only that, you'll live with him too. You can come visit us on Sundays, or once a month, depending on your behavior." Silvestre threw himself at his father's feet. "Enough!" the father cried. "Don't waste the time, or it'll change my mind. I've decided, and I won't go back." Neither the mother's tears nor the sister's pleas could change the lawyer's mind. They had no choice but to obey. Silvestre's mother urged him to behave well, secretly hoping it might soften her husband's heart. His sister cried endlessly. Jose Vargas tried to hide his own sadness by sniffing snuff. Dr. Luis Borges, the man Jose Vargas, now used like a whip to punish his son, had visited the lawyer just 2 hours after he had scolded the boy. The father had told him everything: his worries, his son's dislike for legal work, and his foolish obsession with drawing portraits. "He spends most of his time on that nonsense," Jose Vargas had said. Luis Borges was a lawyer with a sharp mind and a tidy appearance. He wore his hair perfectly comma straight part, and his clothes were always clean and well pressed. He spoke slowly, choosing his words with care. Silvestre's father, on the other hand, was nervous and unsure. He twisted his hands while they talked, and his eyes moved constantly, as if searching for an answer he couldn't find. "If he were stronger," said Silvestre's father, "I would have sent him to the arsenal already, or somewhere else where they teach discipline. I don't even know what he's waiting for." "Have you ever seen his paintings?" asked Luis. "I don't know anything about that," the father replied. "He makes some scribbles and brushstrokes, but I can't understand any of it." "And even if I did, is that really a job that brings money?" Luis adjusted his tie, cleared his throat, and said, "Let me make you an offer." "Go on," said the father. "Your son needs some direction, right? Well, you'll take him under my wing. I can make him my clerk. He'll work under my supervision. But if that's not enough, he should come live with me. He'll go from my office to my house, and from my house back to the office. It'll keep him busy, so he forgets all about painting." "What do you say?" The offer came as a complete surprise. The father couldn't answer right away. He had thought about many things, but never about sending his son away. Still, the offer was generous, and Luis Borges was a powerful man. To refuse would have been both rude and foolish. So the father accepted, thanking Luis many times. They agreed that Silvestre would move in with Luis Borges on the following Monday. Silvestre packed his brushes, canvases, and easel. He also packed his art book, some drawings, and a few unfinished sketches. He wrapped everything carefully, as if wrapping his dreams in green leaves of hope. He wiped away many tears, but finally said he was ready to face his new life. When the time came for his father to bless him, Silvestre saw sadness in the old man's eyes. But his father tried to hide it and said, "Go with God. If you work hard and show care, you'll make a fine notary." "No," whispered Silvestre to himself. "There's something greater inside me. I carry a masterpiece." Chapter 2. Dr. Luis Borges lived in Gamboa Beach, in an elegant, although small house, built after many careful considerations. He was a man of 40, married to a lovely lady of 25. They had no children, no relatives nearby, and almost no friends. Fortune treated the lawyer neither with cold indifference nor with eager generosity. It came and went like the tide he saw from his windows every day. He had the strength not to lose heart during the dry spells, nor to lose his head during the high tides. His motto was laboremus, let us work. When Sylvester arrived on the agreed day, Dr. Borges had just finished reading the newspapers and was getting ready for lunch. The boy's father brought him in, handed him over, and left. The child stood there trembling and speechless. "Come here, my little rebel," said the lawyer, motioning gently. "Don't be afraid. So, instead of copying legal documents, Your Majesty has turned to painting?" Sylvester didn't dare to lift his eyes from the floor. He wasn't only sad, he was also upset and angry. He didn't speak because he couldn't, and even if he could, it was unlikely he would have broken the silence. Borges walked toward him, raised the boy's face with his left hand and studied his delicate features, his bright eyes full of youth and hope, his forehead marked by talent and ambition. At the same time, Sylvester, who until then had not looked directly at the lawyer, now saw his face, a face he had imagined to be wild and terrifying, but which he now found simply kind and warm. "There's something here," whispered the lawyer. Sylvester blushed deeply. "What have you been painting?" "Almost nothing." "Something, at least." "But very little." "I'd like to see it." "I can't, they're just worthless sketches. When I create something great, then yes." "Oh, already thinking about that?" "I think of nothing else." "But boy, no one reaches a great work without passing through smaller ones. You crawl before you walk. I'd like to see you crawl first." Sylvester didn't say a word. Luis Borges had the decency to feel compassion for unfinished dreams, the lawyer thought. "He knows his father brought him here to work and forget about painting," he continued out loud. "But I allow you to paint." Sylvester almost fainted. He grabbed the lawyer's hands as if begging him to repeat what he had just said. The lawyer laughed at the boy's joy. Not only did he say Sylvester could paint in his free time, but he also promised to find him a teacher if he ever saw a serious piece of work that showed real talent. Sylvester's soul finally breathed freely, freed from the sadness that had been crushing him. He had found a protector where he expected to meet a tormentor. He could finally become an artist. And it was touching to realize that Luis Borges, even at 40, had not lost his youthful enthusiasm or some of the illusions of youth. He still believed in art, in glory, in poetry. When José Vargas told him, discouraged, about his son's passion and the need to stop it, so the boy could focus on something more practical or stable, Borges felt joy at the idea of discovering an artist and helping him grow. That was why he made the offer. Borges himself had once had dreams, but time had taken them away, like it takes so many pieces of the soul. Now, sitting among the ruins of his youth, he was happy just to look out at the wide sea of someone else's youth. So Sylvester's life was about to change. His talent had finally found a home. The lawyer arranged a room and a small bedroom for him in the attic of the house. 2 windows faced the sea. Sylvester had rarely seen the ocean. Almost his whole life had been spent locked inside his house in Barro dos Cajueiros. When he looked out at the water stretching into the distance, his soul trembled, like a horse hearing the sound of war horns. He too would now fight the hard, glorious battle of art, which called to him and pulled him forward and which would destroy him if he didn't answer its call right away. Sylvester leaned against the window frame and let his thoughts drift. He thought of his mother, his sister, and his father, people he would now live apart from. A wave of sadness came over him, but it didn't last long. The idea that he would return one day covered in glory softened the pain of leaving and lifted his spirits. The room he was given had only the bare essentials. Not that it mattered, he wouldn't have noticed the furniture anyway. At 15 years old, youth was his greatest possession. He unpacked the tools of his passion, brushes, canvases, and sketches. He placed them carefully around the room, but always in a way that let him hide everything quickly if someone unexpected walked in. Then in his mind, he returned to his unfinished painting of Venus. He pictured her again, adjusting an arm, brightening the colors, rearranging a detail. At first, her pose didn't feel quite right. He changed it, but realized the new position ruined the lighting. So he went back to the earlier version. Her eyes still lacked the emotion he wanted. He promised himself he'd keep working on them until they showed the life he imagined. No one could say exactly how long he stayed lost in these thoughts. Time slipped away until someone knocked on his door to call him for dinner. Luis Borges greeted him in his study, and the two of them walked together to the dining room, where the lawyer's wife was already waiting. There was laughter, kind words, and a warmth that made Silvstra feel like royalty. The care and affection from his hosts felt like happiness itself to the shy, homesick boy. But he barely ate. His shyness and longing for home were stronger than his hunger. He didn't even dare look directly at Luis Borges' wife, though she spoke to him in a voice that sounded like it came from the kindest mouth in the world. Her name was Camila. She was grace itself, calm and elegant, in a way that seemed natural, as if she had been born with beauty and charm already wrapped around her. Imagine a woman not tall, but graceful, her body moving like a serpent, gentle as a dove. Her face was the color of milk, with two soft brown eyes, a nose straight as those on Greek statues, a smooth and thoughtful forehead, the soft curves of her neck, and arms so perfectly shaped that they seemed carved by a master's hand. This was the wife of Luis Borges, but still not all of her, because something was missing, the soul that filled her whole being, something easier felt and explained. It's like her fingers speak for themselves, Luis had said the first time he saw her, 10 years earlier. Back in 1855, she was 15 then, and he was 30. 3 months later, they were married. Once the honeymoon ended, their love did not fade. It had never been wild or stormy, but calm, steady, and deep. Yet, as time passed, Luis began to notice new things. He would say to others, "Camila has a cat in her brain." That was his way of describing her mood, her sudden shifts from tenderness to sharpness, her slow thoughts, her quick temper, and even quicker forgiveness. When Camila learned of Silvstra's story, she treated him with the same kindness her husband had shown. Like Luis, she was ready to let the young artist grow freely, without pressure or limits. Silvstra's presence only deepened the interest his story had already stirred in both their hearts. His poetic paleness, the deep and shining look in his eyes, The veil of sadness he wore like a masquerade, behind which one could see strength and determination, and even his quiet, shy manners made him someone truly special and unique. He didn't need to force his way into their hearts. They opened to him on their own. So, Sylvester's life had become the sweetest thing in the world. Each morning he worked at the office. In the afternoons, before lunch, he studied. Sundays were entirely his own. He would shut himself away, free to work without interruption, fully devoted to his dreams. Sylvester sat at his desk, the salty breeze drifting through the open window. Outside, the sea shimmered under the afternoon sun, and the sky stretched wide and endless. He stared at it, lost in thought, the way he often did when the weight of creation pressed too hard. His sketches lay scattered on the table, rough drafts of myth and memory. He didn't feel like working. Not today. Luis Borges had asked, more than once, to see what Sylvester was working on. Each time Sylvester had refused. These were private things, not meant for other eyes. They were pieces of him, raw and unfinished. That evening, as he returned from the office, he noticed something strange. The door to his room stood slightly ajar. He stepped inside, puzzled. And there she was. Camilla stood by the window, holding a drawing in her hands. It was a study of a harpy's head, copied from an academic model. She was staring at it, transfixed. Sylvester froze. His heart pounded. "Don't be scared," she said gently, sensing his alarm. "I can keep a secret. I was just admiring your inspiration. It's magnificent." He walked toward her, tense and unsure. He reached out his hand. "Give it to me." "It's nothing. Real just sketches." She smiled at him, amused. Jealous? There was something in the way she said it, a softness that disarmed him completely. He hesitated. "Let me finish looking at it," she said. "No," he replied. "Not now. Later." "Liar," she teased. He took the drawing quickly and tucked it away. That's when he remembered. His portfolio was still on the table. He rushed to it, heart racing. But Camilla had only seen that one piece. Relief washed over him. As he carefully gathered his work, Camilla watched him. She studied his face, so delicate, so full of feeling. The way he moved, shy yet graceful. His eyes, deep and filled with something more than just thought. Something alive. "You've hidden everything?" she asked. "All of it," he said. "I'm embarrassed to show you things that are still so rough. When I finish something truly good, I'll show it to you. I promise." She paused. "You think that's enough for me?" she said after a moment. He didn't answer. He didn't know what to say. "No," she continued. "You'll show me everything. I want to see all your work. I want to watch your talent grow. I don't want to be just another spectator. Let me see." Sylvester kept all his drawings and studies in a large wooden chest, pushed against the wall. Camilla took a step toward it. Without thinking, he moved fast and sat down on the lid, blocking her way. Sylvester stood by the window, his gaze lost over the sea, his heart full of dreams. Moments earlier, Camilla had left the room, her laughter still echoing in his mind. He barely noticed the salty breeze that drifted through the open pane or the distant sound of waves crashing against the shore. All he could see was her face, the way she had looked at him, the way she had smiled. "Permit me," he whispered to himself, recalling his own words, "I will show you something worthy of your eyes." Flattery, he had learned, could be a powerful thing. Camilla had stopped, smiled, and even flirted a little. That was the first time Silvestre had dared to look at her directly for more than a minute. Her posture, her unique beauty, the way her eyes met his, it all stirred something deep inside him. He was enchanted, completely taken. And Camilla, sensing the effect she had on him, played with it. "Well then," she had said, "I'll wait. Show me something worthy of my eyes. Are my eyes beautiful?" "Oh, very much so." "Silly boy." With a graceful turn, she had left the room. Silvestre remained frozen in place, overwhelmed by the brief exchange. He had barely spoken, yet those few words had changed everything. He walked slowly to the window and looked out at the sea. His heart pounded with 1,000 ideas. A voice inside him spoke with urgency. "This is your Venus. This is the model for your masterpiece. Your vision has taken form, become a woman, spoken to you, listened to you. You now hold the goddess. You can carry her in your spirit, a heaven of its own. Now, to work. Share your vision with the world." Though only 15, he felt like a man in that moment. That same afternoon, he tried to put his thoughts on paper. He couldn't. He was too shaken, too overwhelmed by emotion. But he didn't give up. Late into the night, he worked to capture her immature posture, her expression just as it lived in his mind. By morning, he had completed the first sketch. Or so he thought. Was it ready? No. He tore it apart, calling it unworthy of her. It wasn't right. Disappointed but not defeated, he returned to the drawing. Again and again, until at last it was perfect. In that moment, Silvestre felt the joy of creation, the joy of a parent holding a newborn. The sketch was just the beginning, no color, no full form, no movement yet, but it was the egg, ready to hatch the bird of his inspiration. Carefully, he stored it away and began preparing the canvas for what would become his true work of art. Camilla hadn't forgotten the boy's promise. Not even once did she bring it up in front of her husband. That silence, Silvestre saw as a sign of trust and discretion, something that made him feel safe around her. He thought her silence flattered him, though he didn't yet have the pride to feel it. It was too early for that worm of talent to bite. For a whole week, he kept delaying the promise. His resistance didn't last long, and he finally gave in. From his early works, all clumsy and imperfect copies, he picked the one he thought was best. Funny enough, it was the very painting of the harpy that she had caught him working on that afternoon. Camilla took it with wild excitement, looked at it with admiration, kissed it, and hid it away. "Promise me you won't show it to anyone," he said softly. "I promise." From that moment on, Camilla became Silvestre's natural and devoted confidante. He shared his dreams, his plans for the future, and spoke with innocent passion about the masterpiece that would one day change the world. But what is it? Camila, the wife of Luis Borges, would ask. You'll see later. I have a canvas upstairs, and on it I'll paint the vision I carry in my head. As soon as I start working, I'll lock the room so no one can go in while I'm away. And if I get another key... Silvestre raised his hands in a gesture of pleading. The innocence of his movement disarmed her. She promised she'd never try to catch him by surprise again. But she made a condition. I want to be the first to see the painting. Silvestre agreed. Just then Luis Borges walked into the room. Without missing a beat, Camila started telling a story they hadn't begun. She did it with such skill and quick thinking that Silvestre was stunned, and all his doubts vanished. Camila wasn't just helping him. She was becoming part of his greatness. Chapter 3. 15 days later, the attorney visited Luis Borges' house to see his son. It had been 2 whole months since he last came home. The mother feared her son's ingratitude more than any illness he might have. The attorney, on the other hand, felt somewhat relieved by the boy's absence. "I've come to see our boy," he said as soon as he entered. "My wife thinks he might have been sick." "No, nothing at all," replied the lawyer. "He's as healthy as an ox." "Even better." "And is he working?" "Yes, very much so." "Well done. He's finally getting used to hard work." "Maybe he still talks about his painting phase." "Doesn't matter. He'll grow out of it with time." "What a shallow mind," thought the lawyer, looking at Jose Vargas. "You don't even know that I may be preparing glory for your name." Silvestre came downstairs to greet his father and offer to walk him home. On the street, when asked why he had stayed away for so long, he struggled to find the right words. He didn't want to admit how much art consumed his thoughts, and he hated the idea of lying. Jose Vargas solved the problem by answering his own question. "I know," he said. "You've been busy with work." "That's fine. It's through work that you'll find your way. The law won't give everyone a palace, but with honor, hard work, and a bit of saving, it can give you a decent and honest life." Jose Vargas kept going with one piece of advice after another, each meant for the situation but far from his son's heart. While his father spoke, Silvestre let his mind drift back to his favorite dream. At home, the joyful noise of his sister and the quiet tears of his mother brought him back down from the clouds to the solid ground of family love. A few hours were enough to ease much of the longing and calm many worries. For a while, Silvestre forgot the deeper feelings that pulled at him. When night fell, he said goodbye, not without promising to return the next week. Jose Vargas walked with him halfway home. As soon as his father left, Silvestre picked up his pace and hurried back to his own house. Camila waited for him anxiously, but when he arrived, she greeted him warmly and with a smile. Luis Borges showed up a little later. They chatted about Silvestre's family for a while before tea. When it was time for Silvestre to leave, the lawyer turned to his wife. "I lied to the boy's father today," he said. "I told him Silvestre is fully committed to my work, when in truth he only does it because he feels he must. If we truly saw real talent in him, if we could say he has a future in this, then my lie would be kind, and time would prove it right. But What do we really know about Sylvester's abilities? Nothing at all. We're just giving false hope to his father, and it doesn't help the boy one bit. It's careless, at the very least. Camilla made a small movement, as if she wanted to speak. What is it? Her husband asked. Nothing, she replied after a pause. Let's wait a little longer. Maybe he'll surprise us. I wanted to hire a teacher for him, Luis Borges went on, but I've seen nothing of what he does. I even suggested he join the academy, but he refused, saying his father would never agree. Camilla had thought for a moment of showing her husband the drawing Sylvester had once given her. That was what made her want to speak. But she had promised the young man she wouldn't show it to anyone, and that promise kept her silent. Now, as her husband kept talking, she felt a quiet voice inside her rise up. Don't keep secrets from your husband, it said. But another voice, closer and more urgent, answered back, remember the promise you made. The first voice insisted, don't be silly. And the second shot back, your word is a promise. They argued like that for a long time, both voices speaking inside her, while Luis Borges, thinking he was having a real conversation, ended up speaking to himself. The next day was Sunday. At last, Sylvester began the famous painting he had carried inside him for so long. As if it marked the start of something new and important, the young artist noted the exact hour and minute he put the first lines on the canvas. Sylvester had the strength of true creators, the kind that often hides the weakness of dreamers, the deep belief that he was born to play a great role in life. How many people, standing before a blank canvas or a clean sheet of paper, feel certain they are about to create something eternal only to find they can't even finish something that lasts a week? Sylvester believed in his gift with a simple, strong faith. He truly thought he would give the world a new Venus, one better than all the others, yet still worthy of standing beside them. Camilla visited him at the first good moment. As soon as he heard her steps, he covered the unfinished painting with a cloth. But this time, his gesture didn't come from the same fear he had felt at the beginning. It was more like playfulness than panic. Already working, she said when she entered. Yes, already. I'll leave then. No, not yet. Is it a portrait? No, not a portrait. Camilla walked closer to the canvas. She reached for the edge of the cloth, as if to pull it away. Sylvester didn't stop her. She didn't push further. In that moment, both showed trust and kindness, and they understood each other without words. There's just one thing I ask of you, Camilla said. What is it? Tell me. Don't break your promise to me. Sylvester nodded. It was all he could do then, because his voice had left him. All he could do was look at her, amazed by her beauty. She had come in dressed with careful carelessness, just enough to make him feel close to her. And in that moment he knew for sure, she was his Venus, and could be no one else. Camilla lowered her eyes, with the grace of a Diana, the huntress. The young artist then opened his folders of sketches and studies. One by one he showed them all to her. Were they good? Camilla couldn't say for sure. Still, she found them absolutely beautiful. Oh, if only you could teach me to draw, she said. Me? I'm only a student. A student. A student of Nietzsche and of myself. Camilla thought for a moment. Well then, she said, Don't teach me. I wouldn't want to take your time. But tell me, would you be willing to draw my portrait? Perhaps. Camilla took the word as a yes, and her smile lit up like a child's. It made Sylvestre smile too, though not from pride, but more from wonder. But don't tell Luis, she said. Why not? I just ask you not to. All right, he replied. It'll be a surprise for him when he sees the finished portrait. As soon as Sylvester was alone again, he felt like a new wind had blown into his soul. A spark of creation took hold of his brush. From that day on, the panel became his only focus. Luis Borges bought him every material he needed without question. I want to help in some way, Luis would say. And to himself, he thought, if, when he finishes, I don't see something truly worth the effort, I'll have no choice but to send him back to the courthouse, where he should stay. Better to be a good clerk than a terrible painter. Midway through the work, Sylvester's sister fell ill. Their father came one day to get him, so he could visit her. Her condition was serious, and he didn't want the two siblings to part without a final word. Sylvestre went, exchanged a few sentences with her, and returned to Gamboa. Luis Borges gave him a light scolding, but the look in Camilla's eyes made up for it all. 3 days later, the sister passed away. Sylvestre went back to his family's house and stayed until the next morning. At noon he returned to Luis Borges' home. He was clearly shaken by the loss, but his mind was still fixed on the panel. The work kept moving forward. He stole a few hours away from painting now and then, just to sit with Camilla and talk in quiet, intimate tones. Her eyes gave him new strength, like a drink after a long day's labor. Then head returned to his easel. Each passing day seemed to pull him further from the concerns of the real world. He lived in a kind of dream, unaware of time or reason. He no longer thought to visit his parents. Sylvestre had always been a quiet boy, the kind who listened more than he spoke. But lately, something had changed. When the lawyer reminded him of his duties, Sylvestre would simply leave the house and walk 20 steps down to the beach, where he'd sit with his canvas in front of him, his brush dancing over the surface like a thought he couldn't quite catch. His mother missed him, of course. She longed for the sound of his footsteps inside the house. But poor José Vargas, his father, believed firmly that Sylvestre was busy, wrapped up in the affairs of the court. Besides, José would say, I don't see why we should ask the boy to come here, when Dr. Borges has been so kind as to give him food, shelter, and an education. It's only natural he works in return. But José, his wife would protest. Couldn't he at least come for a minute to visit us? A minute? José would laugh gently. Why, just getting here would take more than that. Let him rest. He'll come when he can. But he wouldn't. He couldn't. Because Sylvestre no longer belonged to the world outside. The world for him now existed only within the frame of his painting. He no longer gave the same attention to the tasks the lawyer gave him. At first, he had tried to honor the man's trust, to show respect. But now, his heart was elsewhere. Luis Borges, the lawyer, finally gave up. He understood why Sylvester's focus had faded, and he stopped asking the boy to come to the office. From then on, every day was the same. Long hours spent painting and quiet moments shared with Camilla. One day, after working for hours, Sylvester came downstairs and walked to where Camilla sat. She looked up and shivered when she saw his face pale, eyes wide, as if he had seen something no one else could. "What's wrong?" she asked, her voice soft but full of worry. He answered quietly, and his words calmed her. Nothing had gone wrong with the painting. "I just had a dizzy spell," he whispered. "A dizzy spell?" she said, frowning. "You need to rest." He sat down. She stayed near him, watching, her hands folded in her lap. Then she said, "You know what? I think you work too much. I won't allow it anymore. From now on, you do exactly what I say." Sylvester shook his head slowly. "It's not this work that's hurting me," he said. "It's another. This one." He tapped his forehead with his finger. Camilla reached out, gently pushed his hair back, and looked at his face. She didn't say a word. Then softly, she kissed his forehead, a light, warm kiss. He didn't blush. It felt like the kisses his mother used to give him, soft, safe, full of care. He stood up, and together they went back upstairs. Sylvester stood by the window, his back to the room, pretending to study the sea beyond. He was annoyed, yes, but still managed to make sure the painting was covered before he left. "Don't work on it now," Camilla said. "Why not?" "Because I don't want you to." He pushed a little, but she repeated her request, this time not with sweetness, but with the sharpness of a cat disturbed. Sylvester gave in, though clearly unhappy. He leaned against the window frame and looked out at the water. Minutes passed. Then came a small cry. He turned Aronona. Camilla had lifted the edge of the cloth that hid the painting. Slowly, inch by inch, she had pulled it all the way off, revealing the full image. Sylvester didn't move toward her. He stayed where he was, hands behind his back, eyes fixed on the two figures of Venus. Was it admiration for the art that made her cry out? Was it wonder that opened her eyes so wide? No. It was the simple, shining pride of a beautiful girl who sees herself in a painting. The face of Venus was her own. Camilla ran to him, took his hands in hers, and kissed them. "Magnificent! Magnificent!" she cried. Sylvester looked at the painting too, just as moved. The goddess, once in heaven, now fell through the sky. Her eyes turned upward not with rage, but with a quiet, helpless sadness, the kind that comes with final falls. Her hair floated in the air like a last halo of divinity. Her hands pressed against her chest, her knees gave way gently. The figure was carried by the wind of death itself. The painting wasn't finished. Even if it were, it would still lack many things that the young artist's hand had not yet mastered. And yet, it felt like the first light of a brilliant morning. Camilla could hardly contain her joy. He explained the idea behind the composition, and she listened with his hands still held in hers. "You must forgive me," he said softly, "for being so bold." She answered with a playful sigh, the kind that says, "Of course I forgive you." He loved it. The painting was, in truth, her own triumph. Camilla didn't care whether the painted Venus was just a Venus instead of a Saint Cecilia, or whether she moved away from heaven instead of walking toward it. It was her own face, and that was enough. But pride wasn't what stirred the artist's soul. He saw the girl shining like applause, yet he didn't let himself be swept away by it. He looked at his work, still far from the ideal he wanted to offer the world. He only saw what was done and what was still left to do. From that day on, Camilla was allowed to watch him work on the panel. He corrected a line while studying her face, brought life to the eyes of the painting by looking into hers. Camilla took pride in the work. Never had the famous cat that her husband claimed lived inside her head moved more often, nor had it ever changed so suddenly from soft affection to sharp irritation. As Venus came down from the canvas, Camilla seemed to rise toward heaven. Her usual household duties now felt unbearable. She was sharp with everyone, and only gentle with the young painter. Finally, the panel was finished one evening, when the lawyer and his wife went out to dinner. That night, Silvestre told the lawyer the news. "Oh, really?" the lawyer said. "I won't hug you before I see the piece. But I promise, if it's as good as we hoped, you'll end up with 2 broken ribs." Silvestre smiled. "You'll see it tomorrow afternoon," he said. The next morning, after breakfast, Camille went up to the young painter's room. The panel was uncovered. Silvestre sat on the edge of the low window, looking at his beloved. He didn't notice her come in, not even her footsteps. Camilla stopped and watched him. After a few minutes, she moved closer, slowly. Standing beside him, she too spent a long time admiring the painting. How long had they stayed there? Neither could say. Silvestre finally stirred. His hand, held between Camilla's, trembled with emotion. "It's not everything I dreamed," he said. "But I can finally breathe, because I needed to let this out of me." Camilla didn't say a word at first. Her face, calm and open just minutes ago, turned dark, and her eyes filled with fear. "What's wrong?" Silvestre asked. "I never thought about it," she whispered, looking at the painting. "If others see this, if it's ever shown in public, everyone will recognize me." "So what?" "Luis will never agree to it." "But why not?" "Oh, you know why. He has his principles." "Oh, no. Hell never allow it. What were we thinking? I should have stopped you from the very beginning." Her voice shook with emotion. She paced back and forth, sometimes speaking to Silvestre, sometimes to herself. He gently took one of her hands and made her stop. "Calm down," he said. "How can I?" "The painting won't be shown publicly." "I promise." Camilla's eyes lit up before she even spoke. "Really?" "I give you my word." "But..." "Calm down. It'll just be a family portrait. It can stay in the most private room of the house or the most visible one, if Dr. Borges prefers. No one else needs to see it." Camilla turned back to the painting. "But then," she said sadly, "you'll lose your chance. No one will ever see your work." "What does it matter? I needed to paint it, not to show it off." "Is it beautiful?" "Beautiful? It's exquisite. That's all I need." Silvestre walked back and sat on the edge of the window. Camilla came closer, and he began to tell her everything, his whole short life, short in years, but full of feeling. He described every emotion, every hidden struggle, every broken dream, and reborn hope. He told her how hard it was to follow his calling, how every step brought new obstacles, and how he kept going, kept fighting, kept winning. She listened with deep, gentle attention. It was like watching a soul open itself, sharing its most secret truths. "But," she said when he finished, "if you had never met me, would you have painted your Venus just as beautifully?" Sylvester paused. He thought for a moment, but he didn't answer. Sylvester stood there, frozen, the question burning in his mind. Would a yes or no really tell the truth? But Louis Borges' wife kept pressing him. He had to say something. "No," he whispered finally. "Swear it." "There are things you don't swear to," he said. "But I don't think I could have painted someone so beautiful without ever meeting her." Oh, eternal vanity. His words lit up Camilla's face like sunlight. She grabbed his hands and kissed them, her touch pure, but so full of life that Sylvester turned pale. He looked at her, frightened. Her eyes, locked on his, seemed to swallow him whole. Never had pride looked so sweetly. Never had it burned so brightly. But never had a young man's soul been so deeply fooled. Sylvester backed away, his hands pressed behind him against the roof tiles, as if trying to escape her. Vain, she thought with a smile. Then she said, laughing at her own silly joke, "If Louis died, would you marry me?" "No, no," he murmured. Camilla stepped back from the window. His paleness scared her. She opened her mouth to speak, but he was already gone. He threw himself backward and tumbled off the roof, falling to the street below. Camilla screamed. What happened next should have been simple. Find the young painter alive, bring him back, let the two explain everything, return him to his family, and hang the painting. But that's not what happened. The young man Donna Camilla nearly lost her mind. His parents found no comfort on earth known, except the memory of their son. His death had an explanation, they said, the madness of fulfilled talent. That's what Louis Borges and the artist's parents believed. But there's another explanation, much more accurate. Sylvester was mistaken. He saw a gesture of love where there was only a moment of innocent pride. And once he had what he truly wanted, the beauty of Camilla Hay, ran the moment he thought she offered him her heart.
Thank you for listening so far. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like our channel and click the bell to be notified whenever a new book is read. Have you heard of Machado de Assis? Machado de Assis, born in Rio de Janeiro in 1839, is considered one of the greatest writers in Brazilian literature and a master of psychological realism. He was a novelist, poet, playwright, and short story writer whose works explore the complexities of human behavior with irony, subtlety, and deep introspection. Among his most famous novels are Dom Casmurro, which questions truth and memory, and the posthumous memoirs of Brás Cubas, a satirical narrative told by a deceased man. Machado's literature often reflects the contradictions of Brazilian society, addressing issues like race, class, power, and identity in a sophisticated yet accessible style. Despite being born into poverty and facing racial prejudice, Machado de Assis rose to become the president of the Brazilian Academy of Letters and a symbol of literary excellence. His sharp wit and profound observations about society and the human soul make his works timeless and universally relevant. Today, he is recognized not only as a Brazilian icon, but also as a world-class author whose legacy continues to influence generations of writers and thinkers. Machado de Assis shows us that literature can be both elegant and critical, intimate and universal, humorous and profound. His stories remain as powerful and thought-provoking today as they were more than a century ago. Machado is a treasure of world literature, and through his voice, we discover the infinite layers of the human experience.